Truth-telling is this year's theme. Let's think about what some truth might well be. The truth of the Uluru Statement is this: everybody in Australia has nothing to fear, not a thing at all. If tomorrow we held a referendum and First Nations people woke up with recognition in the Australian Constitution, the world will go on. But Australia will wake up not losing 230 years of colonial rule, but gaining 65,000 years of history. That makes this country perhaps the oldest occupied country in the world. That's something we ought to be proud of. But we are being held up by politicians. Now, Noel made mention the Australian public are up for the challenge. And I agree. I do believe the Australian public is up for the challenge. The challenge, however, is to convince the politicians that are holding us back. And it is you, the people of Australia, that needs to convince the politicians. Mention was made of the 1967 referendum. That referendum got up. Very few referendums get up, but that referendum got up because the politicians were together to convince the Australian public. The shoe is on the other foot. It is you, the public, to convince the politicians. And that can be done. And in relation to truth, I've made mention of this many times before. 60 kilometres north of Tennant Creek is a creek called Attack Creek. Should that creek be Defence Creek? Wherein lies the truth of that creek. However, in the spirit of reconciling Australia, if those two groups, the Warramungu group and the Australian people, governments, or whoever the place name mob are, could that creek be called Confrontation Creek, where the Warramungu people were confronted by invaders. The invaders were confronted by the traditional owners. And of course, a bit of a skirmish broke out. So in relation to Australian history, it's non-Aboriginal history that gets recorded in Attack Creek. So where's the truth in that? So these are little things that we have to consider. Now, in relation to the truth of where we are after the Uluru Statement, and I can tell you, in 1988, when we arrived in Sydney with the convoy, I had a tear in my eye. And after the statement was read at Uluru, I had another tear in my eye. But for politicians to just dismiss it after the amount of work that went into it, that nearly made me cry too. So we're up against it. We know that. We know that very well. There are a number of things that we ought to consider when we're talking about where we're going. And I'm going to face a home truth amongst our own people. Throughout the dialogues that were referred to in leading up to Uluru, mention was made on numerous occasions about standing on the shoulders of those before us. It's well and good to stand on the shoulders of those before us if you have a vision of what it is that you want in the future. If you don't have that vision and you're standing on somebody's shoulder, then all you really are is a dead weight. So I say to our youth, don't stand in the shadows of those people before us. Stand on the shoulders, but have a common future. But we do have this problem where, and it was alluded to before, this country had 360 odd different nations. Every one of those nations, we want a common future. No question, a common future. The difficulty we have is which track we are going to take. So it then becomes an issue of internalizing who's right, who's wrong. Is this track better than that track? Or should we make our own track? And in terms of the truth of where we are, we need to deal with that. But I think that can be dealt with. Uluru was an example of being able to deal with that. Quite successfully, I believe. Quite successfully. So we need to now sit down, reassess where it is we actually are, and how do we get our people to stand on the shoulders of those before us, have a vision, and united we go forward. And that's the challenge that we have to face. But that's the truth of where we are at. And I'd just like to finish by saying that in relation to the support and the goodwill that has come out of Uluru, it's really unbelievable. Really unbelievable. The amount of goodwill that's been shown. And people are sending me these media portals where all this is coming from, all these support, the Australian Medical Association, Greek community, this community, that community. But they all see the value of the Uluru Statement. But I can just say one thing, and I'll finish up on this. We could have all the rights in the world, the best rights in the world, and we can have a treaty, the best treaty in the world. But if there is an escape clause that allows a particular politician to say, I don't like the way things are going these days, we'll abolish it, like ATSIC. And I must admit, Vanstone has just recently come out saying that perhaps that was a mistake. Unbelievable. But if there is an escape clause, then we have a problem. The treaty is not worth the paper it is written on. To have something in the Constitution that allows for us to go forward needs to make sure that those things don't happen again. Having said all that, I think we're on the road. I think we're on the right track. The the way things are going, I'm sure we will win. And like I said earlier, the 67 referendum was politicians convincing the people. The next amendment to the Constitution needs you, the people, convincing the politicians that they've got it wrong. Thank you.